Dr. Jeffrey Halstead has been Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, offering routine dental care as well as cosmetic dentistry, implants, and dentures by their highly trained and experienced staff. Visit them online at canandaiguadentistry.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram.
Do you want to know what's happening in the Finger Lakes? We do too. We're going in depth with decision makers in the heart of upstate New York to get the answers you need. From the team of FingerLakes1.com, this is Inside the FLX.
Today we're talking about Governor Kathy Hochul's proposed 2024-25 state budget, which has drawn intense criticism from educators across New York for the impact it would have on rural school districts. Here in the Finger Lakes, schools have gotten smaller, but the cost to educate students, provide them with everything they need, and support teachers with livable salaries has not. The Hammondsport Central School District would lose nearly 31% of its state aid in this proposal. And to talk about it, I am joined by Superintendent Kyle Bower. Kyle, thanks so much for being here. Tough news probably for small school districts, rural school districts. Two questions to start things off here. How did you find out? When did you find out? And how did you feel when that news got to you?
In terms of what's customary and normal is if there is going to be something proposed in the governor's budget that is going to have a negative impact on schools, usually we'll start hearing that information probably October, November. The information will start to come out. We'll start to be able to put together our thoughts about how we're going to address it before the governor goes public and just makes an announcement. This time I opened the state aid runs as I usually do after when the governor sends them to us, and there was a negative $1.1 million aid reduction in our aid run with absolutely no communication ahead of time. There was no mention through any avenue that we have available at the state level that this was coming. So reaction was shock and a little bit of anger.
Yeah. What was your, I guess what you see the state, the run,
Yep.
We'll call it, the next 24 hours, what's your course of action after you see that number? I mean, that's roughly 30% of the total, right?
Correct. And, yeah. I'm in a better position than my colleagues from the standpoint of this is my 17th year at Hammondsport. So I've done a fair number of budgets, and I've lived through the gap elimination adjustment. I've lived through the economic downturn of 2008-9. So there have been economic situations that we've had to work through as a district, but it took me, first thing was you look internally and say, all right, what are we dealing with here? How do we approach this? Because on one hand, this is a devastating amount of money with a $16 million budget, and to lose $1.1 million in 1 year, that is a lot of people, a lot of programs, and a lot of services, or for us, about a 16% tax increase in 1 year. Both of those scenarios are very harmful to our community overall. So it took a good 24 hours to at least think about how to approach this and not tear apart your community by having those conversations. Because either of those options are going to produce significant emotional reactions, either from your taxpayers or from your community. And that's not a positive any way you slice it. So how can we address the issue without creating a polarizing situation, which is the last thing we need in the current political climate to begin with, but especially within school systems where our focus should be on kids.
Have you talked to anybody inside the Hochul administration or around the Hochul administration about the reason for these cuts, like what the argument is for them?
We have had conversations with our local legislators. Phil Palmisano, Tom O'Mara have been very supportive of restoring this foundation aid cut to school districts. I was able to participate in a meeting with a representative from the governor's office through the State Association of School Superintendents, who I have to say, in the past, we've been able to hear a rationale related to the overall economic situation within New York State. They've been able to tie it to a severe lack of revenue that, school districts needed to adjust to. And we've done that. We've met the call every time the state has told us we need to tighten our belts for particular reasons. This particular situation just seemed arbitrary. And although we did get reasons, such as a drop in enrollment, increase in property wealth, basically it was, all right, the state doesn't see any need any longer to provide your district with the amount of money that we have, either reduce the services or get the money from your local taxpayers. And that's basically the rationale that we've received, which, isn't a position to put a school district in when you've got 30 to 45 days to put together a budget to survive the next school year and provide the services and programs that your students need to be successful.
Yeah, I'm curious because you mentioned a tax increase. A 16% tax increase would obviously far surpass the cap. It would be, frankly, unheard of to see that kind of increase, even if it did happen. How feasible would that even be? I mean, if the state is going to make that argument to school districts, you guys aren't alone in experiencing this. Is the state kind of saying, hey, small municipalities across upstate New York, you're just going to have to, maybe increase your taxes by 15 to 25%, depending on how much you're losing here?
Well, I think, if the state were to propose that to us and give us a timeline where that was going to be enacted, school districts and communities have time to make thoughtful decisions. And we've always done that. I've got a great school board. Most districts have great school boards who are very thoughtful about the finances in their community and the programs within their district. We can adjust to most anything. And our community's been extremely supportive of our school district. Our budget's passed with a 90+% passing percentage every year. Our schools are our community is extremely supportive. However, these are difficult financial times for everybody. Although we've got a significant amount of property wealth, our population that actually lives in our community 12 months a year is struggling like every other community. We're one of those communities that has short-term rentals, that has lake property where we don't have permanent residents. But the students and families that do live here and reside here, should have the same programs that you have in a larger suburban school district and have access to those things so that they can be as successful as possible. So I think if we were provided with a rationale and a timeline, we could thoughtfully put together a proposal as a community and a school district to continue to move forward. That can't be done in 45 days to turn around with a budget vote. That's just not practical.
Yeah. When you look back in your career, obviously 17 years is a long time to be in administration, being in a school district. Would this be the most significant financial hit Hammondsport would have taken in that time frame over the span of your career when you look back? If this comes to fruition as we're seeing it now?
Absolutely. And I was looking back, and I believe it was 1920. Around that COVID period of time where, they had told all school districts to expect a 20% aid cut in the coming year. But they had told us that, I think it probably September, October, because of, reduction in sales taxes, everything that went along with COVID, the state didn't have as much revenue. So, but that was out there in, 4 or 5 months before we would actually have to adjust for a budget. And then in the end, they still, even through COVID, they still maintained safe harmless and still provided school districts with at least a small inflationary increase. And that was probably the most recent example of an economic calamity where the state still met its obligations. And I don't believe we're anywhere close to that yet. And to have this done with absolutely no announcement ahead of time, with no planning, is just irresponsible and reckless. And without a doubt, it would be the most devastating. Now, granted, for us, we do not get a huge state aid increase any year. For our district, out of the $3 million we get in state aid every year, we may get somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 in a good year in terms of an increase. But we've always been able to count on that baseline number, that safe harmless number of you're at least going to get next year what you got this year to start with, because health insurance is going up 20%, utilities are going up 30%. Those are outside factors that we have to address in order to maintain educational program. but we were at least able to count on that. And to have that taken away with no notice is devastating.
Yeah. Walk us through, if you could, the impact if that number holds up. $1 million is a lot of money for any district to have to deal with. For students, how would they feel? For teaching staff, how would they feel? What would this look like on the ground, so to speak?
Well, and it's interesting because, as we did, coming out of COVID, we brought in a lot of services to our students because of the needs that they had. We've been able to bring in an additional school psychologist, mental health counselors, maintain small class size, provide pre-K to every student in our district, even though the state doesn't provide us enough money to do that. So we've been able to create a school district and programs that we believe benefit our overall school community. I don't think we have anything in our budget that doesn't have a direct impact on students. So how I framed it with some of the community is, people always look at those things that they think are niceties, sports. So if you took our entire sports budget, it's about $240,000. So, we could eliminate sports for all of our students and not even be a quarter of the way to filling this gap. Clubs, activities, drama club, ski club, National Honor Society, all of those other ones are less than $100,000. So now we've eliminated those and we're still not a third of the way there. Our entire transportation budget to get every student to and from school, special needs placements, out of district placements, field trips is about $600,000. So those three major pieces that are about the only things that wouldn't impact what they get in the classroom, and we're still not there to that $1 million total. And if you're looking at instructional programs, we have 2 sections of each grade level in elementary, which equates to about 14 classroom teachers K through 6. It would take us probably 12 teachers, 12 instructional positions to get to that $1.1 million in overall reduction, or basically, 90% of our elementary school program in terms of instruction, which just can't happen. You can't have a school without teachers, and you can't stuff all students in one classroom just because you don't have the funds to put them in 2. So the solutions for us are not good ones in terms of reductions. I know our community is supportive. I know there's a balancing act we're going to have to meet in the future. But right now, although we have plans B, C, D, we're hoping plan A is the governor will come to her senses and restore this aid. Yeah.
In that worst case scenario, I would assume that in some way, shape, or form, you wouldn't be eliminating your entire transportation budget. You wouldn't be able to eliminate all sports. No. But teachers, I would assume there would be some reduction in number of teachers. Have you thought about what impact that would have in terms of class sizes in your district? If these numbers hold up, like how much of an increase in classroom size you guys might see?
Well, we would have to, if you were to maintain the elementary program as is, because you're not going to stuff 40 students in a classroom. But you'd end up really narrowing. You create a high school program that was just basically, here's what you need to graduate. Here are courses that you need. You're going to get, reading, writing, math, social studies, science, only the core classes that you need to have in order to get your basic Regents diploma. And those other electives, those AP, those ACE, those college courses, the career and technical education courses that the governor is stressing that is what's most successful and what our students need to survive would be the things that we couldn't offer. Her push to mandate, a scientifically based reading program for all school districts, which, coincidentally was exactly what they did 15 years ago, but then they went away from it and now we're back there again. She's pushing a program that we wouldn't have the teachers to teach if her budget cuts go through. So the things that she's pushing in terms of policy and initiatives could not be enacted if the budget cuts that she's proposing come to fruition.
Does that part of it feel intentional? Because one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is just sort of the expectation or the timeline around electric bus implementation in the coming years, which is a timeline that we're seeing, 2027, 2035, a couple serious benchmarks here short term.
Correct.
With these huge cuts, does it feel like rural school districts may be extinct at some point here if something doesn't change with the funding and or the expectation of some of these mandates?
Well, there's certainly the perception that that the governor's office is putting out obstacles that are going to make it extremely challenging in the years to come for small rural school districts to exist. For us, to go from purchasing a school bus that's $175,000 a year to purchasing a school bus that's $400,000 a year, and we need two of them to cover a current bus run that we only need one for. So we're basically replacing a $175,000 bus with $800,000 worth of buses, and then expecting the local community to pay for those is just unrealistic. I mean, our rural school districts are not set up for electric vehicles. Now, could we as a rural school district do more by looking at, all right, what are our shorter runs? What do we have in terms of smaller vehicles where we could purchase Suburbans or do our part in ways that are practical? Absolutely, we could. Again, school districts are excellent at reacting to current times and doing our part. So we would look to do those things. But the mandate that we would switch our entire fleet over to electric, when we don't have the electronic grid in our area to support it, we don't have the routes. I mean, our buses, we have an 86 square mile district, and in cold temperatures, if I can't get a bus to even do a single route without having to come back and be charged, let alone athletic events or, where we're traveling an hour and 15 minutes, for a contest. And then the electrical costs. I mean, our electrical costs this year are going up 30% just to maintain a building.
Yeah.
If I'm also charging 15 to 18 electric vehicles now, that electric bill is going to make my diesel bill and gas bill look like nothing. And I'm not sure how that is sustainable. Again, I understand the purpose, and we can certainly look for ways to meet that challenge. But for some of our districts, the mandate is just forcing us to consider other options, which, as you said, small rural school districts, regionalization seems to be the way of the future. And these decisions are continuing to nudge school districts in that direction.
Community reaction. I'm curious. Obviously, this is still a politics thing and it hasn't happened. So I'm sure there's a number of people who are probably a little tuned out on it, right? But I'm curious what the reaction has been like from the folks in the community who you have talked to, and if you think they understand the severity of these cuts if they follow through as outlined.
Our community has been very supportive, and right now their energy is in lobbying the governor's office. We have a very active and a very supportive alumni association who has taken the lead in getting some information out. Our local staff, I've done multiple town hall meetings where the community has gotten information about what the impact of this would be, and has actively trying to change the governor's mind in terms of direction. So they've been extremely supportive. I think they will be supportive. If the cuts come to fruition, then we have to have a short and long term plan. What are we going to do in year one to meet this significant decrease in revenue, and then long term, what's the future of our school district look like? And it isn't a home budget. Or anybody that runs a business, you lose that much of a percentage of revenue in 1 year. You've got some decisions to make, but we've got a community, we've got a great board. They won't be decisions that result in positives for our students, and that's when it becomes most challenging.
As you look ahead to the next few weeks, obviously we should have a final budget here by early April. What's your message to the community in the meantime as we go through this lobbying, this politics process in Albany?
Well, I think that the conversation and what I would communicate to folks is to continue to communicate the good things that are happening in school districts. I think at COVID and everything the school districts went through. Those impacts are going to be felt for years to come, because it was a long period of time, especially for some of our youngest students who spent a third or a quarter of their life in a home environment because they couldn't go anyplace else. Those are our students now who are in second and third grade and who do need a little bit additional support because they weren't doing the the experiential learning and growing during that period of time because they were in a home environment, and there are some things we're going to need to do to replace that. But continue to highlight the good things that school districts are doing, and that the funds that the governor is providing to school districts are going to students and having a positive impact in what is happening every day in our classrooms. There's always going to be a decision about how money could best be spent and where money should go to, and the governor's absolutely able to have her initiatives and directions that she'd like to see us go, and we're more than willing to do that. But we need time. We need planning time, and if she wants to shift revenue within the whole school funding formula, that's her prerogative to move in that direction. We would just ask for time. Let us know that is what is going to be happening, and give the communities within New York State and in mine and Hammondsport the opportunity to put together a thoughtful plan.
Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time today. Hope to catch up with you here soon when we have better news to talk about on this topic.
Very good. Thank you for taking the time.